My name is Jake. What I'm about to tell you happened 3 weeks ago at a hunting cabin deep in the Adirondacks, where my younger brother Danny and I went for the weekend, just to fish, get away from the city for a bit. The cabin belonged to the grandfather of a friend of ours. It sat completely isolated, about 6 miles from the nearest town, with nothing but dense forest beyond it. No cell signal out there, not a single bar. On our first evening, while we were getting the wood stove going, a local stopped by. Earl Colton, the forest ranger, the only person who ever checked on the place. Older guy, calm demeanor, but his eyes were heavy, like he was carrying something. He said one thing, and I remember it word for word, because the tone he used didn't match his otherwise friendly appearance at all. Boys, if something calls your name from the tree line at night, don't answer, even if the voice sounds familiar, especially if it sounds familiar. If it calls once, you're fine. But if it calls a second time, that means it knows you heard it the first time. After that, you just sit tight and don't open that door, no matter what you hear. The latch is old wood, but it's held before. It'll hold. Just don't be the one to open it. Danny laughed, asked if this was some local legend for tourists. Earl didn't smile back. 3 years ago, 2 guys from the city stayed here. One of them answered. The other one searched for him for 2 weeks straight. All they ever found was his jacket, folded neatly on a tree stump 30 yards from the cabin. Nothing else. He left before dark, didn't even stay for coffee. Danny and I laughed it off over dinner, had a couple beers, went to bed around midnight. It was a 1-room cabin, 2 beds, a stove between them, and a door secured by an old wooden latch about 10 feet from my pillow. I woke up around 3 a.m. to something calling my name from outside. Jake. It was my father's voice. My father, who died 4 years ago from a heart attack. I lay completely still, heart slamming against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. Danny stirred in the other bed. I heard his breathing change. We didn't make a sound. A minute later, the voice called again. Closer now, right outside the window. Danny. Now it was our mother's voice. Danny sat up slightly. I grabbed his arm in the dark and shook my head hard, mouthed the words, "Don't answer." Silence followed. 15 long minutes, so thick I could hear the logs settling in the stove. Then my father's voice called out again, the second time. Jake. And immediately after, no pause at all, my mother's voice. Danny. Outside, footsteps started. Slow, heavy, circling the cabin. Between each step, I could hear breathing. Ragged, too loud to be human, like something was pulling air through a throat too narrow for its lungs. The footsteps stopped at the door. The handle began turning, slowly, downward. I stared at it in the darkness, not breathing. It released. Silence. Then 3 knocks against the window. Soft, knuckle against glass. And my father's voice spoke right against the pane, in the exact tone he used to call me in for dinner when I was a kid. "Son, let me in. It's cold out here." Danny started crying silently beside me, hand pressed over his mouth. I held his shoulder as tight as I could. The voice at the window shifted to our mother, then back to our father, then both at once, like two throats speaking from a single mouth. They called our names back and forth, then together, then started using nicknames we hadn't heard since we were 5 years old. Things no stranger could possibly know. I kept my eyes locked on that latch the entire time. Old, swollen wood. Earl said it had always held. The voices suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, so complete I could hear my own pulse, a new sound emerged. Not footsteps, not a voice. A floorboard creaked. Inside the cabin, behind me. I didn't have time to turn around. Danny sucked in a sharp breath beside me, and that breath cut off mid-inhale, like something had clamped over his mouth. The latch on the door, which I had never once taken my eyes off, was still in place, untouched, exactly as closed as it had been at midnight. The door was locked, but the footsteps behind me were coming from the direction of the stove, from the side of the cabin with no windows, no gaps, no possible way in. I felt breath on the back of my neck, that same ragged, narrow breathing. A half second before something cold and wet touched my throat from behind, and a voice, no longer outside but right at my ear, spoke in my own voice and said, "Don't answer."